WNBA's Brittney Griner is in fact a man. You could possibly speculate, okay, is Brittney trans then? What's the situation here? But there aren't any top surgery scars. I don't give a fuck about women's sports, and I think that most people probably don't care about women's sports, except the women who have been training their whole life to make it on a women's sports team. Like, if this is a successful transition and Brittney is on cross-sex hormones, that means that Brittney has more testosterone, artificially induced testosterone in their system than their female counterparts who they're...
This is from USA Today. They did a fact check on this. Fabricated CNN report of Brittney Griner DNA test. Actually, it's not really a DNA test, but more of a gender verification test.
What if I told you everything you thought you knew about Brittney Girner might have been a lie? Not a twist, not a conspiracy, just a hard, uncomfortable truth sitting right in front of us that no one wants to touch. Not the media, not the league, not even the fans. Because if Brittney Girner is who they say she is, then what happened to her in that Russian prison was one of the most disturbing human rights violations in modern sports history. And somehow, the world barely blinked. No front page outrage, no feminist marches, just a headline, a shrug, and silence. She was locked in a freezing cell, denied basic supplies. Guards laughed at her through a slit in the door like she was some kind of exhibit. She brushed mold off the walls with expired toothpaste. Let that sink in. Not a documentary, real life. 9 months. Alone. Forgotten. But here's where it gets even messier, the part no one wants to say out loud. What if she's not who they say she is? Because now online rumors are spiraling. Podcast clips, viral threads, tweets with millions of views asking the same.
Griner appears to mouth something rather controversial. It might be, though we don't know, trash and possibly fucking white girl. Others have suggested it might be trash and fucking whack call. We don't know what she's mouthing, but she seems to, have a mouth on her and not exactly be in the gratitude space. Griner herself hasn't commented. Now, why is that?
And question, is Brittney Girner biologically male? People aren't ready to hear this, but this isn't just a WNBA issue. It's a cultural firestorm hiding in plain sight, and the scariest part, nobody's asking real questions. Because the moment you try, you're branded as phobic, hateful, or cancelled before you can even finish your sentence. The truth isn't just controversial anymore. It's off limits, but if we're not allowed to question, what else are we blindly accepting? Because whether Brittney's the victim of injustice or the architect of a bigger game, the one thing we know for sure, this story isn't over, and the next chapter might burn everything we thought we knew.
Would WNBA superstar Brittney Griner currently be sitting in a Russian prison if female athletes were paid the same as male athletes in America? Probably not. Let me explain. Many WNBA stars play overseas in countries like Russia to supplement their incomes during the off-season. While the average base salary for men in the NBA this season is about $5.4 million, the average salary for women in the WNBA is $120,000.
New to the ground, they told us to move on. That justice was served. That Brittney Girner made it home, so everything's fine now. But let's be honest, something about the way this all went down doesn't sit right, because when you zoom out, it's not just about Brittney. It's about a media machine that picks and chooses whose suffering is worthy of outrage, whose story gets airtime, whose pain becomes a headline, and whose gets buried under the next trending topic. Let's break this down. A 6'9" black athlete detained in a hostile country, isolated in a cell, humiliated daily, and not one major US outlet made it their mission to keep her story alive. No Rolling Stone cover, no ESPN documentary, no 60 Minutes investigation. Just recycled sound bites and surface-level sympathy. Meanwhile, stories with less at stake have sparked national firestorms. So why not this one? Is it because she's a WNBA player and not an NBA?
If you were being accused of making racist statements, I think you'd want to clear that up quickly. You'd race to the cameras and put out a statement on X to say, I said fucking whack call. I didn't say effing white girl. But she's not. She's apparently totally comfortable letting those allegations linger. Maybe she's worried that the people on the bench or the people right behind her had a recording going.
A superstar? Is it because she's openly gay, masculine presenting, and doesn't fit the cookie cutter image of the perfect victim? Or maybe, just maybe, it's because her story didn't follow the script the media is comfortable telling, and here's where it gets darker. If Brittney Girner was truly a woman, locked inside a Russian prison full of violent male inmates, how is that not a global scandal? Where were the women's rights orgs? Where were the think pieces? Where were the influencers posting black squares and hashtags? Nowhere. And that silence, loud as hell, this wasn't just media neglect. It was calculated avoidance, because amplifying Brittney's story meant confronting a mess of questions about gender, politics, sports, race that no one wanted to touch, but pretending it didn't happen doesn't make it disappear. So, ask yourself, if Brittney Girner doesn't get media justice, what chance does any WNBA player have? And more importantly, who decides which stories deserve to be heard? This wasn't just a detainment. This was psychological warfare. For 9 months, Brittney Girner wasn't treated like a person. She was treated like a warning, stripped of her dignity, frozen in a concrete box, fed expired toothpaste not even as hygiene, but as a tool to scrape mold off the prison walls. Guards watched her through a slit in the door, not for safety, but for entertainment, like she was some kind of freak show. A side act in a country that wanted to make a spectacle out of her existence. No heat.
So clearly whatever AI detection system was used when Brittney posted this and it stayed up for 106 weeks was not like, oh, this is a female chest, we have to take this down. Oftentimes, if breast cancer runs in a family, women will preemptively get like double mastectomies. And there's some great surgeons out there, don't get me wrong, but I don't see any scars on Brittney's chest that would be indicative of a double mastectomy or top surgery for gender transition.
No clean water, no updates, no idea what tomorrow held, and let's be real, this wasn't a tough lesson or a mistake she had to pay for. This was torture. Plain and simple, imagine being 6'9" and black in a foreign prison built to break people. Imagine being isolated not just by bars, but by language, culture, and politics. Imagine having no clue if your government would actually bring you home. That's not accountability. That's psychological collapse on slow drip. But here's the wild part. We were never really shown this. No raw footage. No exclusive interviews from the inside. Just a sanitized version of events, neatly packaged to avoid uncomfortable questions. Because if people really saw the inside of that cell, if they really understood what she lived through, there would have been riots in the streets. Instead, we got memes, headlines, vague updates, and the most insane part. When she finally got out, the world acted like she should just be grateful. Smile for the cameras, go back to dunking, say thank you and shut up, but that's not healing. That's gaslighting, and if you think the trauma stayed behind in Russia, think again. You don't walk out of that kind of hell and come back the same. The real story? We haven't even heard it yet. This is where the internet exploded, not with facts, but with fire, because somewhere between the headlines and the silence, a new narrative was born. One tweet, one podcast, one viral clip at a time. Suddenly, the question wasn't how did she survive that prison? It was, wait, is Brittney Girner even a woman?
Brittney Griner is playing a game, and this is what Brittney Griner calls. I was not going to comment on any of this stuff until this took place. Watch what she says. The entire internet has reacted to this. Here's Brittney Griner. They're playing against the Indiana Fever, and look what she's saying. Go ahead, Rob.
For the ticky-tack fouls that we were talking about earlier today.
Well, that pretty much sounds like trash effing white girl.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just be honest.
So the whole market reacts to this with Brittney Griner, right?
And just like that, the story flipped. Now, let's be clear, Brittney Girner has always identified as a woman, but that didn't stop the online world from launching a full-blown identity inquisition. Every frame from her past got dissected. Her deep voice? Suspicious. Her height? Too tall. Her muscles? Too defined. And then came the wild claims that she fathered a child, that she was secretly trans, that the media had been covering it all up. And the worst part, it wasn't just random trolls. It was influencers, podcasters, even so-called journalists, people with platforms throwing gasoline on a fire they knew would burn. Not because they had proof, but because outrage gets clicks and confusion sells faster than truth. People aren't ready to admit this, but what's happening here is bigger than Brittney, because in 2025, identity isn't just personal. It's political. It's polarizing. It's dangerous. And the second someone doesn't look how society expects it becomes open season. So now, instead of processing her trauma or talking about the broken system that left her behind, we're debating her biology, and here's the twist. The moment anyone tries to push back or ask for facts, they're like,
respectfully, Brittney Griner was in a Russian prison. You would think that somebody who is now free, back in America on home soil, would not have too much to complain about.
labeled a bigot, a header, cancelled on site. So what are we actually protecting? Truth or comfort? If even asking the question becomes taboo, then we've lost more than the narrative. We've lost the right to know. And trust me, this controversy, it's just getting started. See, the thing people don't get about Brittney Girner is that she never tried to be anyone but herself, but that self, it doesn't fit neatly into anyone's box. We're talking about someone who grew up drinking from a garden hose and peeing behind the shed because going inside was too much trouble, who off-roads in the desert like she's in Mad Max, changes her own tires, and winches trucks out of floods not for clout, but because that's just who she is. Masculine, sure. Traditional, not even close. And in a league that preaches empowerment and authenticity, that should have been celebrated. But instead, it made her a target, because Brittney's existence challenges the image the world has for what a female athlete should be. She's not here for the glam, the lashes, or the media-friendly sound bites. She's 6'9", covered in tattoos, deep-voiced, dominant on the court, and unapologetically queer. So when the internet called her too manly, the message wasn't subtle: you don't belong. But here's the MIC drop: Brittney never asked for your approval. She just wanted to hoop, to live, to breathe in a world that keeps demanding she explain herself, and somehow, her identity, the one she's been open about for years, has become the smokescreen people hide behind when they don't want to talk about what really happened to her. Because if we reduce Brittney to a gender debate, we never have to face the deeper issue that we let her rot in a cage while we argued over pronouns. That's not inclusion, that's erasure dressed up as discourse. So yeah, Brittney Girner is masculine. She's aggressive. She's defiant, but maybe that's exactly what it takes to survive a system that never wanted her to, and if that makes people uncomfortable, good. Let's talk about the shield, the one no one wants to admit exists. Because in today's culture war, the moment you wrap yourself in the LGBTQ+ flag, criticism becomes off limits. Doubt gets labeled hate, and asking questions, that's just phobic, right? But here's the thing, what if that shield is being used? This is where Brittney's story gets uncomfortable, not because of who she is, but because of how we've been trained to respond. She's a gay black athlete, endorsed by Nike, backed by institutions that scream equality. But where was all that power when she was rotting in a Russian cell? Now suddenly, we're being told not to question anything, to accept the narrative as is, to avoid probing into her past, her identity, or the inconsistencies, because doing so is problematic. But let's be real, that's not protection. That's censorship, and when someone builds an identity so untouchable that even basic facts feel off limits, you have to wonder, is it still about rights? Or is it about dodging reality? This isn't about hating, it's about honesty. It's about a culture that's become so obsessed with being on the right side of history that we've forgotten how to ask any hard questions without being burned at the stake. Brittney Girner deserved justice. She still does, but justice doesn't mean silence. It doesn't mean blind loyalty, and it definitely doesn't mean turning off our brains every time someone says it's a matter of identity. So let's stop pretending that critique equals hate, because if the truth can't survive scrutiny, maybe it was never the truth at all. And if that line makes you flinch, good. That means it hit something real. Here's the ugly truth: we're scared to say what we're really thinking. Because Brittney Griner's story isn't just messy, it's radioactive. It forces us to confront the cracks in every system we claim to trust. The prison system, the media, the WNBA, Even the culture we've built online, where outrage is currency and silence is survival, we're afraid to admit that maybe, just maybe, the people who were supposed to protect her dropped the ball. That she became a pawn in a political chess game, traded and forgotten like a headline no one wanted to follow up on, and when the conversation shifted from what happened to her to what is she, it wasn't about truth. It was about deflection, about controlling the narrative, about making sure no one ever dug too deep, because if you peel back the layers, you find a woman whose identity was politicized, whose trauma was commercialized, and whose silence was monetized, and we let it happen. We scrolled past it, laughed at the memes, argued over Twitter threads while she sat in a cage, brushing mold off the walls with expired toothpaste. And now we're expected to just move on. No apology, no accountability, just vibes and a vague "she's back" headline like none of it ever mattered. But it did matter. It still does, because Brittney's story isn't just about her. It's about what we're willing to ignore when it's inconvenient. What we're afraid to say when the labels get too loud. And if this is what happens to someone with a platform, imagine what's happening to those who don't have one. So no, we're not done talking. Not even close. Here's where things get real awkward for the WNBA, because while the league loves to champion her time to play, support women, and stand for justice, when it came to Brittney Girner, the silence was loud. Deafening, actually. 9 months in a Russian prison. Psychological torture. Mockery. Isolation. And what did the WNBA give her? A few hashtags. Maybe a couple. Presses. And then, back to business. No league-wide protest. No game delays. No all-star tributes that actually mattered. Just a quiet shuffle to the next headline like her nightmare wasn't a global embarrassment. Why? Because Brittney was too complicated, too messy, too polarizing. She didn't fit the league's glossy brand. Not marketable enough. Not palatable enough. Not inspirational in the right kind of way. And deep down, the league knew it. They knew backing her too loudly might stir the wrong kind of attention, and they chose comfort over conviction. People aren't ready to admit this, but Brittney Girner exposed a crack in the league's soul. The same league that leans on activism when it's profitable, but retreats the second it gets uncomfortable, and fans noticed. Some stayed silent. Some screamed, but most just asked the one question the WNBA couldn't answer. If you won't ride for Brittney when it's ugly, do you really stand for your players at all? Because allyship isn't seasonal. It's not just for Pride Month or press photos. It's about showing up when it costs something, and in Brittney's case, the cost was too high and the WNBA blinked. What does it cost to be Brittney Girner? Not just the fame, not the contracts, but the actual cost, the soul tax of being a symbol when all you wanted was to play the game. Because Brittney didn't ask to be your culture war. She didn't volunteer to be dissected in comment sections, turned into a meme, or weaponized in online debates about gender, patriotism, or who deserves empathy, but that's exactly what happened. She became a stand-in for everything people fear, or hate, or misunderstand. And once that happened, her humanity vanished. She wasn't Brittney anymore. She was a headline, a hot take, a pawn, and the world treated her like one. She paid for it in silence, in solitude, in toothpaste so expired it couldn't clean her teeth, only kill mold on her cell walls. She paid for it in cold nights, in Russian propaganda looping through the walls, in missed calls from her wife, in the gut-wrenching fear that she might never leave, and the world. We shrugged, we posted, we debated, we stood with her from a distance, but we didn't really stand with her. Because if we had, she wouldn't have had to endure all of that alone. And now that she's back, now that the cameras are off and the crowds moved on, Brittney's still paying. With her reputation, with her identity constantly under attack, with whispers and questions and a cloud that follows her onto every court. So yeah, being Brittney Girner comes with rings, stats, and highlight reels, but it also comes with a price most of us wouldn't survive, and she's still standing. Let that sink in.